Welcome to Raj Shamani Clips. Here we are understanding the top leaders and best minds of today to help you become the better leader tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching this.
What was the ideological war between him and Mahatma Gandhi?
That's interesting. So they met as young students when Gandhi was in South Africa and Savarkar was in London. And the fundamental difference of both these men was Gandhi by then had already crystallized his whole non-violent movement, whereas Savarkar believed in a violent armed rebellion, a revolution, and that was their fundamental difference. So when they met in London, I think in 1909, again, if my dates don't fail me, it was during the Dashera that they would organize a lot of debates and talks in the India House, and so Gandhiji had come to this place, and so he was invited to talk. And Gandhi said, I'm not talking about political stuff. I'm going to talk about Ram Rajya and its establishment and how it's so important and how non-violence is important and all that. And then he steps aside and Savarkar takes the podium. And he rebuts every aspect of what Gandhi says, saying, what is absolute non-violence? Is it not alien to our ethos and our culture, especially the Hindu culture? All our gods and goddesses are shown with weapons in their hands. That is not for ornamentation. That is for attacking what you think as adharma. So he said, even you speak of Ram Rajya, even to establish that Ram Rajya, Ram had to go to Lanka and kill Ravan after waging a war. He didn't go there and sit on Satyagraha saying, give Sita back, and he said, okay, chalo, I'll give her back to you. So he had to wage a bloody war. So establishment of Ram Rajya also is preceded by war. And we are talking this, he said, in the Dashera, when all the 9 days the Devi is celebrated, killing different asuras. And even in the Gita, you have Lord Krishna saying, even if the opponent is your own father, brother, cousin, teacher, it's your duty, your dharmic duty to kill the person if that person is on the side of adharma. So his question was, if you consider the British Raj as adharmic, the means don't matter, the end matters, that we have to annihilate it at any cost. So I think fundamentally that was one major aspect of difference where both of them did not agree upon for the longest time, and that they will never converge. They are opposite poles of Indian history. In fact, there are two portraits in the Central Hall of Parliament. Quite ironically, they are diagonally opposite to each other. So they are almost looking at each other all the time as the two opposite poles of our freedom movement too. The other major area where they differed was what Savarkar considered as Gandhi's appeasement policy, particularly of the Muslims, and thereby facilitating or sowing the seeds of partition.
So why do you feel why only one side, or why Mahatma Gandhi is celebrated? Only he is celebrated. I definitely agree that what he's done was really important and actually led us to where we are today. But why only him? Like, why do you feel that there's only one person being celebrated so much, whereas all the other people who you just talked about, they are not celebrated as much?
They are spoken about in as footnotes in our history books, that these were some isolated, acts of bravery. It was not a coordinated movement. Some young, hot-blooded youngsters throwing bomb here and there and killing someone and then being executed. So that's how it's represented to us. It didn't achieve much. The political reason I mentioned, so especially after independence, and Gandhi by then had already been killed. So to make an icon of a person was politically expedient for the party that came to power after that. And to attribute everything to only this and not to all the other streams, it was just for political gains, the manipulation of history, which is the biggest problem in this country, whether what we spoke earlier of medieval history or modern Indian history or even ancient India. So when history is utilized by politicians of all hues for narrow political gains of today, I think the casualty is the countries and generations that grow in it with a warped view of our own past. And that sadly, then and now it continues in different forms.
So you feel all of this, I mean, some large extent part of all these things, like having Mahatma Gandhi on the currency, having MG Road everywhere around the world, around the country,
Yeah.
right? It's largely because of political gain.
No, I wouldn't say that, but completely. But why only him? I mean, every
Exactly, that's what I'm
other.
asking.
Yeah. So we should have. I mean, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was ideally. I mean, when the INA did its exploits, he was declared as the first Prime Minister of Free India. So ideally, and I'm so glad that his statue is there at what is now Kartavya Path, where under the canopy you had the statue of Emperor George V. Here, this was the man who helped displace that man's government. So ideally, he should have occupied that place right then. But it happened better late than never. But why so belatedly? So there are so many others. In every country, there are multiple icons on the currency note. So celebrate Gandhi. We owe a lot to him and his concept of freedom. Some people may agree with it, some people may not agree. A lot of harm also was caused by his ideology, which needs to be discussed. A critique is not a criticism. An honest critique of the positives, the negatives of all these leaders needs to be done dispassionately now, and celebrate all of them. Let's not give one importance over the other. But yeah, iconizing him and making him the face of it was certainly done in the aftermath of freedom, and he was not even there then. And so then to make a deity of somebody is so much more easier. So you needed the governments that came after freedom also drew their legitimacy some way through this iconization. So that, I think, was what it was. But there's no harm in celebrating him, because I think he's the most visible face of the way the world looks at it. And so many people have drawn inspiration from him, whether it's Nelson Mandela, whether it's so many other countries who have drawn inspiration and revere him. So it's perfectly fine to honor and revere him, but not at the risk of making everyone else almost disappear from the firmament.
What were the consequences of, or what harm did Gandhi's movements caused in the country?
So I think we partially discussed that earlier, where what was Savarkar's opposition to him on this whole idea of appeasement politics. The entire the manner in which the country was vivisected on communal lines was largely a manifestation of decades of this very policy, and directly or indirectly, somewhere who takes the blame for the millions displaced and killed and all that happened during partition. If you're taking the credit for the liberation of the country, you also need to take the liability of all the negatives. You can't just cherry pick and say only the positives belong to me, the negatives are someone else's. So when one looks at that, and this inability to understand the roots of separatism, specifically Muslim separatism, which was already brewing in India right from the 18th century, the Wahhabi movements, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and the two-nation theory that he propounded, the AMU, Aligarh Muslim University, the establishment of the Muslim League, the Morley-Minto reforms that came, the Lucknow Pact, separate electorates, the communal electorate bill that came. All these, somewhere the Congress was playing along and not countering it. And the partition was only the last episode in this long phase of appeasement. And this inability to understand that, I think, was a great failure, which one must call out and say this is what it is. It's a historical fact. So one needs to mention it where it needs to be told. So that, I would say, was a very sad episode.